I have read 107 books last year, which might seem like a lot or sound like a lot, but for me, it didn't really feel like it. I didn't feel rushed. I didn't have like a certain goal I wanted to read in a day or in a week or a month or in a year, but still, I read a lot more books than the year before. But the year before that, I was trying to read more. I was trying to reach my reading goals or a certain number of pages per week, but I didn't really read more books until I stopped trying. I noticed a couple of changes in my reading habits that definitely take part in me reading more books and finishing more books. And the first thing I would say, don't set yourself a reading goal. Don't say I want to read that much in a week, or I want to finish one book a month or one book per week. For me, that always put a pressure on myself. It always made me feel it's a chore and I have to check it off my to-do list. And I just stopped enjoying the books I read. So that's the one thing I don't advise you to do. But I have a couple of tips that you can do to just cherish reading more, to generally read more, and a variety of different books. So the first advice that might sound a bit redundant, but it's just read faster. And reading fast is not always the best option. For example, for non-fiction books that are educational and you want to learn something and you're not really familiar with the topic yet, I would not recommend you to read fast. Because if you're trying to read fast, you usually lose out and skip important details that you want to remember. But what you can do is when you're reading fantasy or romance or something that is lighthearted, that is more about the vibe of the story and how it makes you feel than about catching every little detail information. So what I advise you with those books that you just enjoy, do not read every single word, but just skim over the sentences. And what I mean by that is just not reading the book or reading it in your head. What I did a long time, that I just read the book in my head and I was just thinking every word, which is very, very slow. So what I do is just I skim over the lines and let a picture form in my head, like a scene from a movie, just let that play out. And it sounds a bit ridiculous, but it just really works, especially in like fantasy or romance series. They are usually written to make it come alive for you. So the first thing I would do is to not just stick to physical books that every night before you go to bed, you have like 20 minutes of your day to read in bed. That is basically limiting your reading to a certain spot, to a certain time of the day, and to a certain physical book. So even though if you have much more time during the day, you still won't read in that time. So what I do is I have a physical book that I just have lying around that I'm reading. Then I have an audiobook that I listen to when I'm on the bus or on the train or when I'm doing the dishes or the laundry. And then I also have an e-reader that I can have ebooks in. So for example, if I'm going to my boyfriend's and I don't want to carry a lot of weight and a lot of books with me, I just have my Kindle with me so I can read there. Or if I'm on a break at work and I just have 15 minutes to spare, I can, pull out my Kindle and read on that. So what that does for you is that it creates more opportunities during the day for you to read. And I also keep the Kindle app on my phone, so whenever I'm waiting for my pizza in the oven, I can just spend those 10 minutes reading on my phone instead of scrolling through TikTok or through Instagram or whatever you do to kill that time. And you'll see that because you create those opportunities for you to read, that you will just do that more often. At least for me, it was like that. At home, I obviously have my physical copy. If I'm doing something where I can't read a book, I have an audiobook. Whenever I'm going something where it's not at home and I don't want to carry a big book, I always have my Kindle. So like in every situation of my day, I have something to read. And that just makes it more accessible and more easy to actually pick up a book and read. And if you don't like ebooks, I know a lot of people don't really enjoy reading on their screens. You can just take a small sized book with you that fits in a small bag or even your pocket. For example, those little penguin, what is it called? Little Penguin Classics, I think. These are very small sized books that are usually like classics or like classic novellas or short stories. And those very easily fit into the pocket of my winter coat, so I can just take a small book with me and I don't even need another bag. So that's an option for you if you don't really like Kindles, but you want to have a book with you all the time, which I usually do. A lot of the time I actually have my Kindle and a small book with me, depending on what mood I am. So then I would advise you to not only have like different types of medias to be reading at all time. So usually I have a physical book that I'm reading, I have an audiobook that I'm listening to, and I have an ebook that I'm reading right now. So those are already 3 books at the same time, which is kind of counterintuitive for a lot of people. Like I used to read 1 book at the time, and when I finished that, I would start a new book. But I feel like having multiple books at the same time makes sure that you're always in the mood to read something. So that's the next point. Have different vibes of books, like different genres or different difficulty levels. So for example, you might have a non-fiction book that's on how to learn Mandarin. So something that really uses your brain. You have to think, you have to learn. It's like a really conscious reading experience, which might be exhausting. You don't want to do that maybe after a long day of work and you just want to cozy up on your couch with a tea. Maybe that's not the book you want to read right now. So I would advise you to also have a fluffy romance book or a nice fantasy book that you can lose yourself into, whatever you like, that for you is kind of comforting and will wind you down and it's just a bit more chill. And also I usually have a manga or a comic or just a graphic novel in general. So sometimes I'm just not in the mood to read a lot of words, but I still want to read and enjoy a story. I usually have a manga series lying around or a graphic novel, which is kind of a lifesaver for reading slumps, because sometimes I'll be in a book that feels very heavy and hard to get to, and then just lightening it up with a short break with a manga or with a short break with a romance chick flick book that really keeps going the reading mood. And this is like my number one advice to overcome reading slumps. Just have different variety of books at your hands. So the next thing is annotating books. I love to do it. There are people that don't do it at all. There are people that do it a lot. I'm like somewhere in the middle. I don't annotate every book, just the ones where I feel like the language is pretty or I want to keep a lot of quotes. For example, if I'm doing Shakespeare and like to analyze more, whereas when I'm reading romance, I will maybe highlight a couple of cute phrases, something poetic, but I don't do it a lot. But still, sometimes it just brings me out of the book if I see, oh, I want to remember that and I want to underline that, or maybe write something there. I usually just dog ear the page, and if you don't like to do that, which a lot of people don't, just put a tab in there or something like that, put something in the book or a receipt or something like that to remind you to annotate that later. And when I finish the book, I will go through all of the dog ears and I read that page and see, oh, that was what I wanted to remember, and then I annotate it and I take my time, and it's really fun going back to the book and to your favorite moments. And just living through that again. So that's also like a nice bonus, I feel like. I also have that I go through this page and I'm like, what did I want to annotate? What was so important? And sometimes it's not. So you can just undog ear that and just forget about it, because sometimes I'm like in the mood to annotate and I will annotate the weirdest and like most boring things. And when I'm like, I'm flipping through my annotations, I'm like, why did I annotate that? It's not even important or pretty or something else. So yeah, read first, annotate later. You will not get out of the reading flow and you will have a nice excuse to relive that book again. So the next thing, you don't need large amounts of time in your day to read. I used to think 30 minutes while you open up the book, that's not enough time. I then have to do this and this and this. But usually for me, if I just take multiple 5-minute breaks a day where I would scroll through Instagram, or when I'm waiting at work for someone, I would just, have my tiny little book with me and just read a couple of pages here and there. And this will get me through so many books without me even noticing. I'll be on the train, 20 minutes to work, 20 minutes back. So I have 40 minutes of listening to an audiobook a day. And then you'll just go through audiobooks passively, which is going to work. Or you're waiting on your pizza and you have 5 minutes here, you have 5 minutes there. And yes, of course, if you're reading 4 different books at a time, you will get through them slower, you would think, because it just takes you more days, but still you will finish 5 books in that time. So you might think you're not doing a lot of progress, but you are. I mean, you could also have the same book as a physical, as an ebook, and also as an audiobook, and then just switch between those. and just one book at a time. You can also do that. That's just not what I like to do. I just don't like buying it 3 times. So that's a lot of money, first of all. And also I just like to switch up, to be honest. And the last thing, but probably the most important thing, read books you actually enjoy and DNF those that you don't like. I'm guilty of trying to finish every book I've started, even if I notice on page 50 that I just don't like it at all. And it has 300 pages and I will just get through it. And I hate every minute of it. But I just have this feeling, oh, what if on the last page something so incredible happens that it will make the book worth it, which usually doesn't happen. It did happen in the past, but not a lot of time. For example, if I'm reading a romance book and I just don't vibe with it and I think the characters are too quirky and I just don't like the humor and the tropes, then I would just stop reading it. Like, it's a romance book, it's fine, you don't have to finish it. Of course, there are classics that make it worthwhile. For example, for me, A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens was not very enjoyable to get through, but there were a couple of moments and quotes towards the ending of the book that I really enjoyed. So I'm grateful that I did finish it. So there are classics that are classics for a reason, and you might want to give it a second thought if you want to DNF it or not. But if you don't like it, you don't like it. There's so many classics that are 800 pages long, and if you don't like them, it will take you months to get through, and you will not enjoy it, and it will put you in a reading slump, I promise you that. And it will be really hard to get out of it. So don't be afraid of DNFing books. I don't like it, nobody likes it. It's just this feeling of being weak, of just not finishing things. But that's not really the point of reading. It's for you to enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, quit. Don't continue reading. Pick up a new book. You'll like that more, probably. And if not, DNF that as well. It would just slow me down because I was reading one book at a time, and then I sat down to read, and after 7 pages I was like, oh, I want to get through it, but I just don't feel like it right now. That's not my vibe. And I would just love to read one now, but it's not that book. So for me, that really helped me, having different books on command, just saying, okay, I'm not going to finish this book. And yeah. And also, you can, of course, set a reading goal. I did as well for this year. For 2024, I want to read 100 books again, but this really just helps me to keep on track. For example, I did not finish a book for the last 3 or 4 weeks, I think. I'm still on track because at the beginning of the year, I've read a lot of books. But you have those ups and downs. You will read a lot in 1 month, you will barely read in the next, and that's completely fine. If you don't have the time for it, don't rush yourself. And even if the reading goal says that you're 3 books behind, that's fine. Another thing is vary between lengths of books. Sometimes I feel very slow and like I'm not making any progress when I'm reading those big chunky books, like 800 pages and the next is 900 pages and the book after that is 700 pages. I feel like I'm not reading a lot, even though you are, but the book is just long. So for me, sometimes it helps to pick up a shorter book that is like 100 pages, maybe a novella, a collection of short stories maybe, that would just get me in the mood. Oh, I have something finished. So this will just give you the feeling, oh, I've actually finished something, which sometimes makes me feel more reassured. Okay, now you can spend your time on an 800-page book. It's a weird thing. I don't know how to explain it. I sometimes need those little treats. Oh, I finished a book so quickly, like half an hour. Wow. So I'm not depressed anymore. Wow, I'm reading this book for 3 weeks. Nice. So I think the gist of the video is just switch it up. Switch up the format, switch up the vibe, switch up the length of your book, and don't feel like you have to stay at anything longer than you actually want to. Put it down. Don't listen to the audiobook. Get up the Kindle. Maybe don't listen to music. You don't have to. If you force yourself to read, it will definitely take out the joy. I've experienced that. I just wanted to be someone that reads all the time and finishes so many books and the fastest reader in the world, which is not really something to be proud of if you don't enjoy it. So yeah, these are my tips for reading more or enjoying reading more. I think I'm going to scroll through BookTube instead of reading now. I think that's the plan. Bye.